So I am going to be making another split side skirt because I've made two now and I just love them and I want another one. And also because the other two had some major flaws and I just want to keep going at this until I get it right, I think. Quick recap of how this skirt works in case you don't already know is there are slits on the slide, which is how you get in and out. The back panel closes from back to front and then the front panel closes from front to back, and it also has ginormous pockets, which is awesome. For this one, I wanted to break out of my trend of using really dark fabrics and actually do a fun color. And for a while now, I've had it in my head to do a knee-length green skirt. And so I found this one at the craft store. I love it. It does have a slight pattern on it, which is good because I struggled putting patterns into my wardrobe. And so this is a good opportunity to do that. I am a little bit nervous though because it has a direction. There are lines that go up and down and side to side. So I might have to pay attention in construction to make sure that looks good. I don't know, I'm gonna have to think more about that. But anyway, there's my fabric. And then as far as closures go, I'm going to do what I've done for my other two. I'm not gonna try anything new. I'm doing the hook and eyes, connecting the back panel in the front because it works so well. It does exactly what it needs to do. It's so adjustable. I'm doing that again. But for closing up the front panel, I am going to be doing something different. I'm going to be doing what a lot of people do with this style of skirt, and that is to make it into a sash and tie it behind you in a bow. And honestly, I think that is a much more simple approach because how I've been doing it in the past is doing some crisscross ties, which is a lot more complicated. There's a lot more fixtures to have to deal with, and it is hard to put on. So I think this skirt should be easier. I think, hopefully. We'll see. So, one other thing to let you know about before I get going is I think I want to try and make this a 3/4 circle skirt, which I've never done before. It's a little intimidating to me because I have no idea how it works. Why I want to do that is because all of my skirts I have are full circles because it's easy, it's beautiful, love it, but if there is ever a gust of wind or anything like that, it has the capability of going all the way up. So I want something that is a little bit smaller just so it does have a limit of how high it can go. This fabric is a lot thinner than I was hoping. I was hoping it would be a little bit more thick and have a little bit more structure and volume. This is very drapey, but I'm sure it'll look gorgeous anyhow. So those are my two new things I'm learning during this, is doing the sash and then doing a 3/4 circle skirt. So let's jump in and see how it goes. First step, I think, is figuring out the math. And there's so much math involved in sewing. If you're not a sewer, it will shock you how much of sewing is math. But anyway, here's what I figured out so far is there's a calculator online you can go to that does all this math for you. So my waist, I want it to be bigger because I discovered with the other ones that you sew it and you lose some fabric with the seams and everything. So I said that I put into the calculator that my waist was 34 inches, even though my dropped waist is going to be more like 33. I put in 34 just so I'll have some extra fabric and some wiggle room. So with that math, the radius of my waist should be 6.43. So this is what I'm worried about though. This fabric needs to be 2 panels. I mean, so logically this would go like that so that you can have a front panel and a back panel. Here's my main concern, is the direction of the fabric. Because it has lines, I assume that I would want the middle to be this way. Oh, it's not even in camera. But you know what I mean? The pattern would be straight up and down in the front, but then over here, it would need to be straight up and down in the front as well. Those weren't exactly straight, but you get me. And if I cut this all out at the same time, that's not going to happen. And so that's my concern, is to figure out how to make the fabric look good with that pattern. That's my main concern with cutting out the circle skirt. I think I'm going to do a mock-up real quick of this to make sure I have it all right before I cut into my real stuff. So I am going to pre-wash this fabric, as I do with all of my fabrics, because I like to machine wash all of my final garments because I don't have it in me to be hand washing or drying or dry cleaning or any of that stuff. I have had clothes like that before that I've tried to work with, but I always forget and they end up in the dryer anyway and then they're ruined. So I pre-wash stuff just to try and get that obstacle out of the way. But when you pre-wash fabric, the ends can fray very badly. So what I'm doing here is a long zigzag stitch along the raw edges of the fabric so that it will be contained and hopefully not fray really badly when I wash it. Something I'm learning about doing this right now though is that this fabric seems to be very shifty, which I probably could have predicted. It is very, you know, silky and smooth, and it's thin. Working with shifty, silky fabrics is never fun. So that's going to be a fun twist in this project. Also, I meant to mention that I wish that I could give this skirt a lining, but with this design, with having the panels and the slits on the side, I don't know how to incorporate a lining in a good way. I could probably figure it out, but my brain can't wrap itself around it yet. So wish this could have a lining, but oh well, I'll just wear a slip underneath. Ooh, and I just realized that this fabric actually has a right side and a wrong side. One side the lines are dark and the background is shimmery, and on the other side the lines are shimmery and the background is dark. Okay, let's see if I can figure this out. When you buy it at the store on the bolt, the inside is the right side, right? Okay, this is straight off the bolt. Okay, so this is the outside, this is the inside. So the right side is background shimmery, lines dark. Okay, so it's on record now. I've recorded it. I can look back at this and remember which is supposed to be the right side and the wrong side. I might change my mind. I don't know. I'll play with it and look it over, but okay, at least I have it documented for which is supposed to be the right side. I was having a really hard time getting my imagination jump started on how to do this 3/4 thing. I tried looking up online on YouTube some ideas, and none of them were quite exactly what I needed, I think. So to try and help me out, I decided to draw out this 90-degree angle on a piece of paper to be a tool as I tried to wrap my head around this. Okay, I have actually recorded a lot of videos that I am cutting out of my video here because they were all documenting me trying to figure out the 3/4 angle and how to cut that out to be in 2 panels, so the whole thing would equal 3/4, and how to make each panel follow the direction of the pattern. And I just realized all that work I did doesn't make sense. And so here I go. I think I have an idea now of how to figure out how to cut it out. Anyway, okay, let's try this. Okay, so here's how I've made this make sense in my head. So there's a 90-degree angle, right? So this should all be 3/4 of a circle. I have measured out to 6.5 inches, rounded up, and that's where my waist is. Okay, now, but the thing is, I need directional pattern stuff, right? So how to find the angle is I have simply folded this in half, right? Okay, and then that line and this line, that should be the angle that I cut both pieces. Huh, isn't that right? My little cat. Okay, let's give that a shot. And also, that zigzag stitch along the edge to keep it from fraying totally worked. Once again, I just did a whole bunch of videos that I'm going to delete and not put in this big video because they're not applicable. I've been fussing around with these measurements and this fabric so much and just keep getting it wrong and wrong and wrong. But I'm only putting in here what I think is applicable. A few little detours, but we'll get there. All right, this paper was starting to get confusing for me to look at as I was trying to like visualize it on the fabric. So I just simplified it and put it onto one piece of paper. So this is what I'm looking at now. This is one panel. This is what one panel will need to look like. And it occurred to me, I'm pretty sure that the pattern needs to be straight right here in the front. So fold it in half. This is what will need to be on an edge. If I fold the fabric to cut it, I'll meet at the edge, and that is the angle I need for one panel. And it's like there might have been an easier way to figure all this out, but I just could not find it because my project is so different. Like, this isn't conventional in any way. Like, yeah, there's nothing very orderly about this. And so, yeah, that's why I'm having so much trouble with this. So finally, on to actually cutting the panel out. When prepping for this, I tried to follow the direction of the pattern to line everything up instead of just folding it over and looking at the edges and stuff. I tried to follow the pattern in keeping everything straight when cutting. And there was a lot of pinning involved in this part because it was so silky and shifty. I did all of my lines with chalk and with pins just to make sure it stayed put during this whole process. So I decided that with my skirt panels, I am going to do what I did to it before I washed it, which is go around the edges with just a long zigzag stitch to retain the raw edges, just because I don't know how much this fabric is going to fray, and honestly, I'm going to have a hard enough time dealing with just how shifty it is. So if I can take one obstacle out of my way just to try and make it easier in whatever way I can, I'm going to do that. And then also do the stay stitch along the concave curve of the waist of the dress. Always do a stay stitch. It's very helpful. I just realized that doing that stay stitch might not have been a good idea because I was intending to do the thing where you like hang your circle skirt so that like, you know, so the pieces that are on the bias can relax and lengthen so you can trim it at the bottom to make sure it's even at the bottom. I just realized that with, oh sorry, I meant the zigzag stitches on the edges, it might prevent that a little bit. We'll see. Oops. All right, so now that my two skirt panels are done, it is time to move on and think about the pockets and the waistband, which are the two other major things. And something that I've been thinking about is that this fabric I'm using for my skirt is very shifty, very thin. So I think for the pockets, I think I want to give a layer of structure to it, because if I'm putting a lot of stuff in my pockets and weighing it down, I don't know if that fabric will hold up to that very well. So I have my, you know, fashion fabric that is what is made out of my skirt. But then I also have this kind of canvasy fabric that's really thick. The color doesn't match exactly, but I think if I'm tricky and I put it on the inside or pick one of the panels, I don't know, somehow I want to attach it to at least one of the sides of the pocket to make sure that it is more sturdy and strong. And I've also been thinking about maybe doing that for the inside waistband, the one that is attached to the back panel and closes in the front. I haven't made up my mind on that one yet though, if I want to add a strong structured layer to that one, because I won't do it in the front. That it would just be messy and I don't think it's necessary. You know what, yeah, I am going to add a structured one, because then when the front one does close and tie, it might look a little bit more smooth if it's on a more structured one underneath. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Okay, so now I'm going to figure out how to engineer this into the pockets. We'll see how it goes. All right, for my waistbands, I have measured and have decided that this length of the fabric from selvage to selvage will be enough for my front one that will tie in a bow in the back. That is long enough. And then I believe this edge should give me enough to be the back waistband that'll attach in the front. If not, I should be able to cut some more out of here, and then I should be able to get at least 2 pockets out of that. Probably not that. And then I'll just get the rest out of the other scrap that I have. Also, this is skiwampus for a reason. It was cut uneven. I think I have made the pattern straight now, so I need to cut that to be even. And turns out I actually might be able to get a pocket over there. That'd be awesome. For this part of my project, a rotary cutter was definitely the right tool to use to cut these out. Okay, I just finished cutting out all my pieces. We've got the pockets, the side that you will see, the other side, and then 2 little strips that are going to be covering that fabric, so you won't see that color. 2 strips for the back waistband that connects in the front, and then the larger waistband that will wrap around and tie in the back. All right, let's dive into pockets. So these pockets are going to be very different from my other 2 skirts, so I'm gonna have to think a little bit more on these. Here's what I'm doing. This pocket, once in the dress, it is attached to the back panel, which is here, right? And then the front panel goes over top of it, but the slit will open here and the dress will open and you will see this front side. So this has to be the fashion fabric, and this can be the back side. Though when you open your pocket, I don't want this fabric to be seen, so I just cut out a strip. I'm gonna sew to it so that'll match. And also, I need to go back and look at that video I took of what is the right and wrong side of this fabric and make sure that the right one is towards the front. All right, a tip that I was just reminded of. When you have a very sturdy fabric and then a very not sturdy fabric going through the machine, you want to have the sturdy one on top, because if you have the shifty, less or more flexible one on top, the foot will push against it and push the fabric, and then it doesn't line up at the end because it has been being pushed the whole time. And so I had this on top and that happened, and so now I'm going to top stitch this just to make it nicer and flatter, and I will definitely make sure to have the canvasy one on top so that doesn't happen again. The feet will grip that one appropriately and it'll turn out better. Had my heat too high ironing, totally melted right through that. I'm gonna have to patch that up. Alrighty, so I have finished putting this strip onto both pockets. It is nice and flat, and now I'm just going to treat this piece of the pocket as just one piece that just has a different color on the side. So there's that. I've actually already finished one of the pockets. It is all done. This is all French seamed and strong, and I think that little strip of fabric will hide enough. That's all it needs to do, just so if I open my pocket while I'm taking something in or out, it won't show that other green fabric. Voila. I think I have decided that I am going to try and put a slip in, because this fabric is just thin enough that I'm not going to feel comfortable unless there's something underneath, and I don't want to have to try to remember to wear a slip every time. It's just going to be so much easier if there's one in it. A couple things with that is I don't know how to put a slip into this style of dress that makes sense in my head yet. I'm going to have to try and figure out a way that makes sense. And I wish I had green. I don't have green, but I want to get this dress done fast, this skirt done quick. So I have this white, so I'm going to do that, I guess. Okay, let's do this. So my game plan for the slip is just to make 2 panels like the outside, but make them smaller. For the waist, instead of 34 inches, it is 32 inches. And for the length, instead of 24 inches, it is 20. So hopefully it won't be seen. And instead of 3/4 circle, I am only doing a half circle. I don't need as much volume, and I wasn't going to go through the headache of measuring out 3/4 again. So this slip fabric is knit, so it's not going to fray, but I felt the need to do something around the edges, but I wasn't about to do a hem. So I just went around the edge with a zigzag stitch again, just to contain the edges, keep them a little bit more sturdy. I would love to do something more with them, but I don't have it in me right now, and it's not seen, so we're going to do this. Maybe at some point I will hem the bottom, but that'll be it. Okay, I'm actually very glad that I hung this skirt. I debated not to since I did the edges, but I am glad I did, because look at this. Look, like the middle. Okay. This slides right under it. This one's bumping into it. And then look over here, they're like so uneven and so long. Wow, these are really uneven. Okay, yeah, I'm definitely gonna even that out. For attaching these pockets, I feel like I actually have a pretty good system now that works really well. I'm not going to bother talking about it in this video. I've already talked about it plenty in my other two. So if you're interested in knowing how I do that, you can check them out over there. One of the things I love about this design is that it's pretty flexible. In some places you do need precise measurements, but there's so much of it that you can just kind of wing it or just play with it project to project. It's one of the things I love about this design is it does not have to be exactly perfect. There's some flexibility there in the design. Love that. So now before I assemble the waistbands onto the skirts, I need to make sure my closures are all ready to go. For the hook and eyes, I like attaching 2 together just so it is extra long. This might be a little excessive, but if I'm going to have a skirt advertised as being adjustable that you can wear anytime, if your body is fluctuating or whatever, I want to make sure that I can follow through on that. It is a little bit tricky making sure that you can work around the metal, but I think I found a way to make it work. And I just like having the peace of mind that I have all that extra space to adjust it to if I want. So for this one, I did try to cut away a little bit more of the bulk that comes along with attaching 2 together, because I realized that the sash going over top is going to be pretty darn thin, and I'm worried that it might show through a little bit. And so hopefully this will help to minimize that a little bit. These waistbands have taught me that I was wise to do those zigzag stitches on the edges, kind of searching it, because yeah, this fabric does fray pretty good. I'm glad I did that on those other edges. So how I'm finishing up these waistbands is different than I did on my other 2, which is to sew the whole thing inside out first and finish the edges that way with the closures inside. So then you can just turn the whole thing right side out and the edges are all clean and ready to go. This is probably a better method to be using on this style of skirt. So I played around with this a couple of times, turning it in and out, seeing how it was, and I'm glad I did because I actually did mess up. One of the closures was upside down, so I fixed that before going ahead and sewing it all together. I did just finish ironing these edges down towards each other so that when I do try to put the skirt in, it will fold inwards like they're supposed to, because neither of these fabrics like to do that naturally. So I just finished ironing down those two edges inward. So to insert the slip, I am just attaching each of the slip panels to each of the skirt panels and basting it across the top to keep it in place while I assemble everything. But then I took a slight detour and worked on the front waistband for a minute that's going to tie behind my back, because I realized while working on the back waistband that I think it's a bit too big and the front waistband is not going to hide it and cover it. So I wanted to see how big the front waistband was first. And lo and behold, it was quite a bit smaller than what the back waistband was going to be, and so I had to take a couple steps back, undo some stuff, and trim off a bunch of the excess fabric. Start that bit again to make it the right size. Then after all that was sorted out, I went ahead and started connecting the skirt piece to the waistband. And I am doing something I've never done before, which is basically just finishing off the sides and top of the waistband and leaving the bottom open like a little pocket to slide the skirt into and sew it down and attach it in that way. It is a little bit tricky just to make sure everything lines up on both sides, but I think I figured it out and I think it's gonna look okay. To attach the skirt and waistband, I did a stitch all along the bottom connecting it and then also on either end. I probably could have done a top stitch along the top as well, but the canvas layer was strong enough that I didn't feel the need to do that. Well, here is the back panel all done. It's always so satisfying to see something done and put on you. Somehow this is like just barely big. I'm on the last couple of ones, and so I'm glad it's so long. I am now really starting to doubt whether putting a structured back panel on these pockets was a good idea, because it makes perfect sense in my head as a concept, but look what happens when I put my hand inside. Look how this like flares out because it's so much more stiff. Oh, I'm so worried that's going to be a problem. We'll see. Maybe once it's sewed down to the other panel. I don't know. I'm still learning. But I like how the slip turned out, and the very bottom of it I'll sew to the front slip, just on the bottom to tag them together. So I think that was a very good decision. I'm glad that I did that. All right, let's finish up the front and get them put together. I have made a decision. It was not an easy one, but I've slept on it, and I have decided that I am going to redo the pockets. It is not going to be easy. I am going to have to do a ton of unpicking, disconnecting it from the waistband, unpicking that bit, and also detaching it from the skirt, which there's at least 2 rows of stitches keeping it in there. None of that is going to be fun, but then I will also need to make another one. And my concern is still there for it not being strong enough, so I am going to do it 2 layers of this fabric, because I'm tempted again just to use a thinner cotton or something more sturdy, but I think I need to use this fabric that will drape in the same way. But I don't trust it as just 1 layer, so I'm gonna do it double layered. This was not a fun task, but I think it is the right one. I've put so much time into this skirt. I would hate for it to be finished and not be able to wear. That would be awful. So I'm going to correct it right now and get that how it should be. Jumping back a couple steps here, just to give you some insight as to one of the things I changed during the process, was each of the pieces I sliced off 1 inch off the bottom, because the bottom of it does seem to stick out quite a bit from the skirt. So I wanted to just trim a little bit off from the bottom to kind of hopefully help with that problem. That's better. These are the new pockets. Lots softer. They are still fairly, look, they are thick. They are 4 layers of this fabric, but as you can see, it drapes way better. Cut probably helps, Both sides are doing this kind of strange puckery thing up here, but I mean, I don't know. Once they're covered by the front, I don't know if I'll care. Honestly, I don't care enough to do anything at this point anyway. I think that was a good decision. It was a lot of work to do, but there's that. Time to finish or make the front piece. Okay, let's get going on that. So this sash that attaches to the front is a lot longer than the actual panel that it's being attached to. And so the parts that go beyond the panel, I decided to sew closed first, just to help keep this in the right shape as I went along. So the ends I sewed up and then pulled right side out. And then to make sure that the ends, which I had tapered towards the end, were turned out completely, I used a piece of boning I had nearby to push out the very ends to get it out. This fabric was consistently fighting me on being ironed and getting flat, and so something I did to make this work was using a pin to snag the sewing line, the threads that I sewed on, and pull it out, and I would do that in a little section all along it and iron that part so that it would be as correct and flat as possible, and then I would move on and did that down the whole thing. As I went along, I got better and I got faster and more efficient at it, and that was a great technique to help me get this sash ironed flat. So for this, I am going to be putting all the pins perpendicular to the edge for sewing, and that is because when it is that way, it holds all of the fabric firmly where it needs to be. So as it is being sewed with the foot pushing on it and the feet pulling on it, it will stay where it needs to be, because if it's in a straight line right on the sewing line, sometimes that can shift around. So that is why I'm putting all of these pins perpendicular. And I decided I am going to sew each of the ends, top stitch them all the way around before finishing the middle, just because I don't have a lot of faith that this fabric will want to stay in this ironed position for too long, and so I am going to get it how it needs to be right now. So then for the front panel, I started off with basting the slip onto the top just like I did with the other one. Then for the sash, I ironed the whole thing nice and flat so that it would be all ready to put onto the skirt. And I first top stitched the top of the sash just to make sure it all stayed really sturdy and in place while I tried to attach it to the skirt. But then realized I had pinned the wrong side, so I had to move the pins to the other side because I want to sew from the front, you know, the side everyone's gonna see. That's the side I want to ensure that looks good, so I'm gonna switch them over. And here it is. All I have to do now is sew up the sides so they're connected on the side, but I'm loving this. This sash is very thin, but like I said, the very structured one underneath is going to help keep it smooth. I was worried you were going to be able to see the, you know, the texture of the hook and eyes underneath, but it's pretty darn smooth. The most texture you see is from just the fabric inside from sewing the skirt on. The slip underneath is cutting it close. The end of the skirt is here and the slip is there. There's only like an inch. In my head, it was going to be more than that. So what I think I'm going to do, sorry, I need to keep stuff in frame, is the slip. I am going to sew them to each other just down at the bottom in like the last, 6 inches under the pocket, probably. Well, yeah, it would have to be under the pocket. Because in my head, I was hoping this pocket would be like in front of it, but yeah, that doesn't work. This is all over top. So do that. So the slip under there, and then this front panel gets sewn to the back panel around here-ish. And I don't know, the slip should be contained, hopefully, and not show. That's my hope. It's a little bulky looking just because I have my jeans underneath, so ignore that. This sash is cutting it close. The bow is just long enough, which honestly I was going for. I didn't want a huge sash just like hanging down in the back, so it's fine. It could have probably been okay being like maybe 4 inches longer, would have been good, but I'm happy with it. It ties, it holds it up. Ooh, I love it. The color, the shimmer, the pattern is straight up and down in the front, which is great. I'm very happy with it, and there's no, as you can see, there's no like bulk from the pocket sticking out. If nothing else, I realized even if I had kept the canvas pocket, something that probably could have been okay is just the slicing of the inch off the bottom so it wouldn't poke so far out. Maybe I could have kept the canvas if I had trimmed that in. I don't know. I'm liking how this looks and how this feels though. Okay, let's sew up the sides, hem the bottom, and see what it looks like. All right, so how I went about connecting these two together was I pulled out the pattern for the pocket looked down to find where I had marked where I wanted the panels to get connected together and marked that spot. Then grabbed the front panel, laid it over top, and instead of trying to tuck in the edges that like it might make sense to do, I'm just doing what I did on my other skirts where I lay it directly on top and then just stitch it down on top of the other panel. So I pinned them together first just laying on the table, but then when I tried it on I realized that the front panel needed to scooch down just a little bit. It was frumping up a tad. So I put it on myself, readjusted it, and pinned it where it needed to be. But it turns out that where I had actually marked for them to start connecting did end up being a little too high. It needed a little bit more flexibility and room, so I moved that down, I don't know, about an inch probably before I connected them together. And here it is, all done. I love this skirt. I feel like I did finally get this design right. I love how this looks and how it feels and how it functions. I do love how the 3/4 design turned out. It does exactly what I want to, where it does have a limit to how high it can go, keeps me modest, but there is still quite a bit of fullness in it. I love how that looks. I have not attached the slip at the bottom like I said I was going to, attaching the front and back together, but it does work with them detached, and so I might just leave it this way. We'll see. And at the top by the pockets, the slip really doesn't show unless I'm like really pulling the front panel back, and so I think that worked out just fine too. The front panel does overlap a little too much over the back panel because I was paranoid it wouldn't do that because of the past skirts that I've made. And so every opportunity I had to round up the numbers to make it bigger, I did, and I did overcompensate. It does go a little too far, which isn't too bad, but it does make putting my hand in my pocket a little bit awkward, but not too bad. And the pockets did come out a little bit small because I had to trim quite a bit of excess around the edge, and I took out that extra inch from the bottom. So they are a little bit more snug, but not that bad. My phone and my keys and everything still fit into them very comfortably, so they still function just like they're supposed to. It's fine. The tie in the back is so cute and it works really well. I love that design and how that looks. I think the sash turned out really good. I'm really happy with how the color turned out. I was really worried it might have been too shimmery or something like that, but I love how the green looks and I'm glad I finally have a little bit more color in my wardrobe. The bottom is not perfectly even, but I'm hoping you didn't notice that before I pointed it out. I'm hoping it's not too noticeable and that I can get away with it. Overall, I love this skirt. I think it's the best one I've done so far, and I am going to be wearing it quite a bit. I love it. So thank you so much for watching this video of me making this split side adjustable skirt, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!